So imagine looking up at the sky, right? Like right after a catastrophic storm.
Yeah, everything is still dripping wet.
Exactly. The clouds are finally, breaking apart. The rain has totally stopped. And across the horizon, you see this massive, brilliant arc of colors.
A rainbow.
Right. And today, we look at that and think of optics, I guess,
Hmm.
light refraction, or like maybe a pot of gold at the end of it.
It's just pretty, we think of it as completely benign.
Benign, yeah.
Yeah.
But what if, instead of just a beautiful optical illusion, you were actually looking at a decommissioned weapon of mass destruction?
Oh, wow. That is a heavy way to frame it.
Right. I mean, what if that arc wasn't just some cute symbol you paint on a nursery wall, but like a sniper rifle?
Mm-hmm.
One that had been emptied, safetied, and hung up in the sky, explicitly aimed away from you.
That completely flips the script.
It really does. And that is exactly what we are getting into. Because today's deep dive is going to completely shatter, and I mean shatter, the Sunday school version of the Noah story you might have in your head.
Yeah, we're definitely moving way past the whole, happy animals marching 2 by 2 onto a wooden boat aesthetic.
Totally. So we are pulling from this really extensive, honestly incredibly dense theological document by Chris R. Velazquez. And we also have a series of highly detailed infographics that pair with it. They both unpack the covenant with Noah.
And they are so detailed, like granular level detail.
Oh, for sure. And what these sources reveal is that the simple turning of the seasons, right? The fact that society hasn't completely annihilated itself, the fact that the sun literally came up this morning,
Yeah.
none of that is just the blind machinery of physics humming along. It is a calculated daily act of divine restraint.
Okay, let's unpack this because it's huge.
It is huge. It honestly forces a total reframing of how you experience reality. Like the central thesis of the documents we are analyzing today is that the world continues to exist, like literally the ground remains solid under your feet, specifically because of this ancient covenant.
That is just wild to think about. Right. We are talking about a covenant of preservation. The theological term they use in the source is common grace.
Common grace.
Got it. Yeah, and it's basically the mechanism holding the universe together right now. But to understand the sheer gravity of this promise, you can't start with the rainbow.
Right, you can't start at the end of the story.
Exactly. You have to start with the water. You have to start with why the weapon was drawn in the first place.
Right, because if you don't understand the severity of the disease, you just can't understand the radical nature of the cure. So let's get into the context here. Genesis chapters 6 through 9.
The flood narrative.
Yeah. And for a modern reader, honestly, this narrative is deeply uncomfortable.
Oh, absolutely. It's jarring.
It feels like, I don't know, a divine temper tantrum. Like
Mm.
God gets frustrated that his creation isn't following the rules, so he just like flips the board over and drowns everyone.
Which is such a common modern interpretation. But the sources we're looking at, they push back on that narrative violently.
They really do. Like Genesis 6 doesn't describe a world of people just making minor ethical blunders.
No, no, no.
It describes a total systemic collapse. I think it's verse 11 that says, the earth was filled with violence.
Yeah, filled with violence. And that phrase requires some historical unpacking, honestly. Because in the ancient Near East, this isn't referring to, like, occasional bar fights or localized skirmishes.
Right, it's not just people being mean to each other.
Exactly. The Hebrew concept here implies a world where the strong systematically devour the weak. It's institutionalized predation.
Institutionalized predation, wow.
Yeah, the social fabric had completely unraveled. The text actually says every thought of the human heart was only evil continually.
Only evil continually. That is so absolute.
It is. We are talking about a society that had essentially become a meat grinder, where the original goodness of creation was being actively, intentionally dismantled by humanity.
So it's less like God throwing a fit and more like an agonizing but necessary medical intervention.
That's a great way to put it.
Think about it like an amputation, right? If you have a patient with gangrene and the infection is rapidly spreading toward the heart,
It acts fast.
right, and the surgeon doesn't cut off the leg because they hate the patient.
No, of course not.
They cut off the leg because if they don't, the patient dies entirely. So the violence in Genesis 6, that's the gangrene. The flood, as horrific and absolute as it is the surgery required to stop the cancer of human violence from consuming the entire host of creation.
The documents really emphasize that, too, that the flood is profoundly morally grounded. It wasn't arbitrary. It was righteous judgment against a violently disordered world.
Right.
But what is critical here, and the infographics actually map this out beautifully, is the timeline of grace.
The timeline. What do you mean?
Well, grace doesn't show up after the flood to apologize for the mess. Grace precedes the judgment.
Oh, wow. I never thought about it like that.
Yeah, the text says Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord before a single drop of rain ever fell.
Before the storm even started.
Exactly. The intervention was designed from the beginning to preserve a remnant, so the human story wouldn't just end in the mud.
Okay, let's talk about the mechanics of that preservation then. Because the infographics highlight a detail about the ark that, honestly, I had completely glossed over my entire life.
Oh, I think I know which detail you mean.
Yeah, so Noah spends decades building this massive vessel, right? He follows all the architectural blueprints. He gets the pitch, the gopher wood, the dimensions. He does all this grueling human labor.
The physical work of it was immense.
Huge. But when it's finally time, Genesis 7.16 drops this incredibly haunting line. It says, "The Lord shut the door behind them."
The theological weight of that single door being shut by God is just immense.
It really is.
It moves the ark from being a monument to human engineering into a vessel of divine sanctuary.
Right. Like Noah did his part, but he couldn't finish it.
Exactly.
Well,
Noah could build the walls, he could gather the animals, but he could not seal himself in against the wrath of the floodwaters. God had to actively secure the perimeter.
it's the ultimate statement of dependency, isn't it?
Totally.
Like, Noah is inside listening to the literal destruction of the known universe, and his only security is the fact that the creator of the universe locked the door from the outside.
It's terrifying, but also deeply comforting.
But okay, here is the massive, glaring problem with my own amputation metaphor from earlier.
Uh-oh. Where does it break down?
Well, in a surgery, you remove the infected tissue, and the patient wakes up cured, right? The gangrene is gone. But Noah isn't cured.
Ah, yes.
The family on that boat, they are carrying the exact same genetic and spiritual material as the people drowning outside.
The infection was on the boat.
Exactly. They bring the disease of sin right onto the ark with them. So when that door opens again, yeah, the earth is washed clean, but the humans walking onto it are still deeply, fundamentally broken.
Which is exactly what we see play out almost immediately in the text.
Right. It doesn't take long at all.
No, the text doesn't hide Noah's subsequent failures. He plants a vineyard, gets drunk, and his family descends into this really shameful conflict.
Yeah, it gets dark fast.
It does. The infection survived the flood. And this reality, the enduring, bent nature of the human heart, is the exact friction point that makes the Noachic covenant necessary in the first place.
Wait, how so?
Think about it. If God's standard is absolute purity, and humanity is still corrupted post-flood, then logically another flood should be inevitable the exact moment Noah steps off the boat.
Because they're already sinning again.
Exactly.
Okay, so walk me through the mechanics of what happens the moment they step off. Because it's a crazy scene. The ground is finally dry, the door opens, and they walk out into what is literally a graveyard of a world.
The smell of death must have been everywhere, just overwhelming.
I can't even imagine. And the first thing Noah does is build an altar and offer a sacrifice. And then God speaks.
Genesis 8, verses 21 and 22. This is the hinge upon which all of subsequent human history turns.
The hinge point.
Yes, God smells the pleasing aroma of the sacrifice, and he says in his heart, "I will never again curse the ground because of man, for the intention of man's heart is evil from his youth."
Okay, let that sink in for a second.
It's crazy. He doesn't say, "I will never curse the ground," because they've finally learned their lesson.
Right. He says the exact opposite. He says, I know they are still broken. I know they are going to build new corrupt empires. They are going to invent new weapons. They're going to oppress each other all over again.
The diagnosis hasn't changed at all.
Right. The diagnosis remains terminal, but the treatment plan shifts radically.
Exactly. God essentially says, because their hearts are bent toward evil from youth, if I respond to them with immediate retributive justice every time they sin, I would have to destroy the world every single generation.
We would never make it past, like, Tuesday.
Right. So instead, he says, I am going to institute a universal system of preservation, and he guarantees the stability of the natural order.
Seed time and harvest, cold and heat.
Summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. That's the promise.
This is that concept of common grace that the Velocys document spends so much time on, isn't it?
It is. It's the bedrock of common grace.
Yeah. And to visualize this for you listening, we really need to abandon the idea that common grace is just God being, like, generally nice or polite.
Oh, it's way more intense than that.
Right. Think of humanity as a crew on a deeply damaged spacecraft, adrift in the void.
I love this metaphor.
Thanks. So we're on this ship, and we have mutinied, We are actively smashing the control panels, we're tearing up the wiring, and we are literally trying to kill each other in the mess hall.
Total chaos.
Total chaos. Now, common grace isn't the rescue ship arriving to take us home. Common grace is God from the outside manually keeping the oxygen recyclers running.
Wow.
It's God keeping the artificial gravity on and ensuring the radiation shields don't fail day after day despite the crew's relentless ongoing sabotage.
That is a phenomenal mechanical breakdown of the concept.
Thanks. It just really helps me see it.
Well, it's accurate. Common grace is the oxygen in the lungs of a ruthless dictator, just as much as it is the oxygen in the lungs of a saint.
God is funding the biological existence of both of them.
Exactly. It's the rain falling on the crops of a farmer who curses God, and the exact same rain falling on the crops of a farmer who prays in gratitude.
It's totally indiscriminate in that sense.
It is a suspension of immediate hostility. God is absorbing the cost of human rebellion just to keep the stage of history open.
And the scope of this treaty is mind-boggling. The sources point out this isn't just a localized agreement with one ancient family, right?
Not at all. Genesis 9 expands the scope massively.
Right. It goes to Noah, all his descendants, which, by the way, includes you listening to this right now.
Everyone listening is part of this covenant.
And it goes even further. It includes every living creature, the birds, the livestock, the wild animals. It is a covenant made with the earth itself.
It is a cosmic, ecological, and intergenerational ironclad guarantee.
Which brings us back to the signature on the treaty. Because ancient covenants required a sign, right? Like a visible token of the oath.
They always had signs. Circumcision, the Sabbath, things like that.
We touched on the rainbow in the introduction, but the linguistic context the documents provide changes the entire texture of Genesis 9.13.
It really does. The Hebrew word used there is quishet.
Quishet, meaning a bow, like a weapon of war.
Yes, a war bow. In the ancient Near East, deities were frequently depicted as warriors.
Like storm gods, right?
Exactly. Storm gods like Baal or Marduk, they were imagined as riding the clouds, firing arrows of lightning down upon the earth.
That's terrifying imagery.
It was meant to be. The bow was the ultimate symbol of divine lethality and militaristic dominance.
So when God tells Noah, I have set my quishet in the cloud, Noah isn't thinking about, leprechauns or prisms.
No, not at all. He's thinking about the weapon that just annihilated the globe.
But the orientation of the weapon is the game changer here. Look at the shape of a rainbow, right? The arc, the curvature of the bow is pointing upward. It is aimed at heaven, away from the earth. The string is loose. It's an unstrung, decommissioned weapon hung up on the mantelpiece of the sky.
What's fascinating here is it's a visual declaration of divine disarmament regarding a global flood.
Divine disarmament. I love that phrasing.
Yeah, because think about it. When storm clouds gather, which for Noah and his sons would have been a trigger for profound psychological terror.
Oh, literal PTSD.
Yes.
A flashback to the annihilation of their whole world.
Exactly. When those clouds gather, God paints his decommissioned weapon on the very clouds that cause their terror.
The threat itself becomes the canvas for the promise.
Precisely. It acts as both a memory of the severe judgment that sin requires and a permanent, visible promise of mercy.
I really want to dig into the architecture of this mercy, because the Velazquez text doesn't just treat this as a neat historical footnote.
No, it builds a whole theological framework out of it.
Right. It argues that this covenant establishes the theological rules of engagement for the rest of time. The document structures this around several core pillars, but rather than just, listing them off like a textbook, let's look at how they actually function in reality.
Sure. Where do you want to start?
Let's start with the first dynamic, this idea of God's faithful patience. The fact that the earth hasn't been swallowed by a black hole or destroyed by nuclear fire isn't a testament to human diplomacy or scientific advancement.
No, not even a little bit. It's purely a testament to divine restraint.
Which is humbling.
Very. The text asserts that history does not collapse into chaos because God is faithful to his own character, even when humanity is completely faithless.
But this patience isn't aimless, right? It's not just waiting around for the sake of waiting.
Right. It has a specific trajectory, which introduces the next massive concept from the pillars.
Yeah.
Preservation makes salvation possible.
The document refers to the Noahic covenant as gospel adjacent, I think.
Yes, gospel adjacent, meaning the life raft isn't the rescue ship.
Going back to our spaceship metaphor, keeping the spacecraft's oxygen on doesn't magically get the crew home.
Exactly. It just keeps them alive long enough to make the distress call.
Wow. So without the Noahic covenant putting a concrete floor under human history, the whole structure collapses.
It would. If God doesn't promise to maintain seed time and harvest, there is no agricultural society for Abraham to emerge from.
Right, he wouldn't exist.
There is no stable environment for the nation of Israel to form. There is no stage for the prophets to speak on, no lineage of David, and ultimately, no manger in Bethlehem.
The entire Christmas story, the whole gospel, depends on the seasons turning first.
Absolutely. The incarnation of Christ requires a physical, stable world to enter into. The cross requires a hill to be planted on.
That is so profound.
By preserving the natural order, God is meticulously building the theater in which the grand drama of redemption will be performed.
Which means the physical world matters deeply in this framework. This directly challenges the ancient Gnostic idea, and frankly, a lot of modern spiritual assumptions that the material world is just a dirty, disposable shell that God plans to throw in the cosmic incinerator once he's done rescuing our souls.
Yes, Gnosticism hates the physical world.
I see that attitude all the time today, too, that this world is not my home, I'm just passing through mentality.
Right, like we're just waiting for the escape pod.
Exactly, which can sometimes lead to a really toxic disregard for the physical earth. But if God makes an everlasting covenant with the soil, the birds, and the seasons, that means the dirt matters.
The material world is the theater of God's glory.
It is inherently good, and it is worthy of being sustained.
It forces a really high view of creation on the believer. And within that creation, we see a complex rhythm established by the flood narrative, which is the next pillar, the simultaneous occurrence of grace and judgment.
Okay, I have to admit, I struggle with this one.
Really? Why?
How do grace and judgment occupy the exact same historical space without canceling each other out? They feel like opposing forces, like hot and cold water mixing into lukewarm.
They aren't opposites, though. In biblical theology, they're deeply intertwined mechanisms.
Intertwined? How?
Think about the Exodus. God judges the oppressive empire of Egypt.
Right, the plagues and all that.
But the exact same mechanism of judgment, the plagues, the parting of the Red Sea crashing down, is the very mechanism that liberates and redeems Israel.
Oh, I see.
The judgment on the oppressor is the grace for the oppressed.
Wow. Okay.
The Velasis text argues that the flood is the earliest, most stark blueprint for this pattern. The destruction of the violent, corrupt world was the only way to graciously preserve Noah's family.
So you're two sides of the same coin.
Exactly. And this rhythm culminates at the cross, where the ultimate judgment against sin falls in the exact same moment and place as the ultimate grace for the sinner.
So the flood sets the vocabulary for the rest of the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
But here's where we have to be incredibly precise, because there is a massive trap here.
A trap.
Yeah. If God is preserving the world for everyone, and the sun shines on the just and the unjust alike, doesn't that imply a sort of universalism? That eventually everyone just gets a pass?
Yes, the sources are hyper-vigilant about clarifying this distinction. That's the fifth pillar, universal, not universalist.
Can you break that down?
Sure. The covenant is universal in its scope of physical preservation. Every single human being on Earth today benefits from the gravitational pull staying constant.
Yeah, we all benefit from the crops growing.
But physical preservation is not spiritual salvation.
The life raft versus the rescue ship.
Exactly. The life raft keeps you from drowning today, but if you don't eventually get onto the rescue ship, the life raft will eventually degrade.
Right. It's a temporary fix.
God's common grace in providing a stable world is an invitation. It's an extension of time. The Apostle Paul actually talks about this in the New Testament, that the kindness of God is meant to lead people to repentance.
So the stable seasons are supposed to make you look up and ask, who is keeping the lights on?
Exactly. It does not mean everyone is automatically reconciled to God just because they didn't get struck by lightning today.
Which brings us to the sixth pillar, and probably the most abrasive part of this covenant for a modern listener. Human responsibility.
Right, the mandate.
Genesis 9.6 delivers this iconic mandate. It says, "Whoever sheds human blood, by man shall his blood be shed, for God made man in his own image."
That is the theological bedrock for all human dignity right there.
It really is. But God also reiterates the command to rule over the earth, the animals, to multiply. Let me push back on this, though, because ruling over sounds a lot like a blank check.
In what way?
Well, if God promises the world won't be destroyed by a flood and then tells humanity to rule it, isn't that just a mandate for autonomy? Like, can't we just strip mine the planet, exploit the resources, and do whatever we want since God promised the system won't completely crash?
That is the ultimate distortion of the mandate.
So how does the document define it?
The text explicitly defines this role not as autonomous sovereignty, but as deputized stewardship.
Deputized stewardship.
Yes. You have to read the mandate to rule within the context of the image of God. In the ancient world, kings would set up statues, literal physical images of themselves in the far reaches of their empire to declare, I am the sovereign here, and this statue represents my authority.
Like a flag on the moon.
Exactly. Genesis says every single human being is the living, breathing statue of the High King.
So we are placed in the world to reflect his character and his rule, not to just invent our own.
Precisely. We are viceroys. We are middle management.
Middle management, I love that.
Well, think about it. You don't manage a property you don't own by burning it down or exploiting it, right? You manage it according to the desires of the owner.
Right, otherwise you get fired. Or worse.
Right. We are called to manage the earth with the same wisdom, restraint, and care that God demonstrates in preserving it. The promise that God won't destroy the earth is not a license for us to try and destroy it ourselves. Accountability absolutely remains.
Okay, so if we pull back from these pillars and look at the massive timeline the Velocys document constructs, it literally maps this out across 14 stages of human existence. How does this covenant actually hold the grand narrative together?
It acts as the ultimate bridge. The documents start before time, in eternity, with God's purpose.
The setup phase.
Yeah. Then, creation, which establishes a world that is fundamentally good. But then the fall introduces a lethal virus into the system. Sin endangers the very existence of creation.
The spacecraft is rapidly depressurizing.
Yes. And that is where we hit the hinge. The Noahic covenant is God stepping in and putting a sealant on the hull.
He stops the depressurization.
He binds himself to preserve the earth, ensuring the environment won't collapse. Because that environment is stabilized, the redemptive line can begin.
That's Abraham, Israel, the prophets.
Exactly. God calls Abraham. He forms a people, and even when that people rebels and is sent into exile, the world doesn't end.
The seasons keep turning even during the exile.
Right. The covenant of preservation holds the world together during humanity's darkest alienation. It acts as a prelude to restoration, waiting for the climax.
And the climax, according to the sources, shifts the focus entirely to the Messiah. The New Testament connections here are honestly wild.
They are so rich.
Colossians 1:17 says of Christ, He is before all things, and in Him all things hold together. So the preservation promised to Noah, the invisible hands keeping the universe from spinning apart, finds its true identity in Jesus. He is the ultimate sustainer.
And because of him, the church today exists under this rainbow of mercy.
So what does this all mean?
It means the mission of the church, proclaiming the gospel, seeking justice, building communities, is only possible because the world is being kept stable for that very purpose. The bridge of the Noahic covenant gets humanity from the absolute ruins of Eden to the ultimate glory of the New Jerusalem.
It's a massive bridge. But anytime you build a theological bridge that massive, people are going to drive off the edges.
Oh, inevitably.
The sources explicitly flag several dangerous myths that distort how people understand this covenant. Let's play devil's advocate here for a second and tackle these.
Okay, let's do it.
Myth number 1. If God hung up his bow and promised never to curse the ground again with a flood, doesn't that mean we are in the clear, like final judgment is permanently off the table?
It's a comforting thought. I get why people want to believe that, but it's a catastrophic misreading of the text.
How so?
The promise is incredibly specific. Never again will there be a global flood. The water will never again wipe out all flesh. But the documents heavily reference passages like 2 Peter 3, which clarifies that the present heavens and earth are being stored up for a final day of judgment and destruction of the ungodly.
Ah, so the weapon of the flood is decommissioned, but the courtroom is still open.
Exactly. The Noahic covenant preserves the world until the day of final accountability. It does not cancel the day of accountability.
It just ensures history reaches its appointed conclusion rather than ending prematurely in a watery grave.
Perfectly said.
Okay, here is another myth, myth number 2, that I think trips up almost everyone, even subconsciously. The myth that preservation equals approval.
This is a huge one.
Let's say I'm an ancient empire, or even a modern superpower. My economy is booming, my agricultural yields are off the charts, my technology is advancing. It is incredibly easy to look at the sun shining on my empire and think, God must love what we are doing.
Right, you assume you have divine favor.
Yeah, because if he hated our systemic corruption, surely he would send a lightning bolt or a plague. So the continuity of our success feels like moral endorsement.
And this is exactly where the doctrine of common grace is so vital. The fact that lightning doesn't strike a corrupt society is proof of God's patience, not his approval.
So a good harvest doesn't mean you're righteous.
Right. When a corrupt CEO eats a delicious meal from a harvest that God provided, that isn't God blessing his corruption. That is God giving him another day of borrowed breath to repent.
Wow. Assuming that earthly prosperity equals divine endorsement is how empires justify atrocities, isn't it?
It is the root of so much historical evil. The Velazquez text strips that away entirely. The sun shines because God is faithful, not because we are good.
That is incredibly sobering. And it ties right into the next myth. Confusing common grace with saving grace. We mentioned the life raft earlier.
Yes, myth number 3.
Just because you are experiencing the profound kindness of God in the physical world, enjoying a beautiful sunset, holding a healthy newborn baby, laughing with friends, does not mean you are spiritually safe.
The physical blessings are real, and they are beautiful gifts, but they are not the ultimate cure for the disease we discussed earlier.
They don't cure the gangrene.
No, they are meant to point beyond themselves. If you love the gift but ignore the giver, you are fundamentally misunderstanding the purpose of the preservation.
Right. And there's also a myth on the opposite end of the spectrum, usually found in, like, extreme environmentalism.
Myth number 4, treating creation itself as the ultimate reality.
Exactly. The idea that preserving the untouched state of nature is the highest possible moral good, almost treating the earth as a deity.
The biblical view is remarkably balanced here. Does the earth matter? Absolutely. God made an everlasting covenant with the animals and the dirt. We are explicitly commanded to steward it.
But creation is not ultimate.
No, it is currently subjected to futility, according to Romans 8. It is groaning. Our final hope is not just endless centuries of the current natural order. Our hope is a glorified, resurrected new creation where the disease of sin is finally eradicated.
The earth is the scaffolding. It is not the final building.
Great analogy. And the last myth, myth 5, is what we touched on earlier. Thinking stewardship equals autonomy. We don't need to rehash it, but it's a vital reminder that we are managers, not owners.
Okay, so stripping away all these myths leaves us with a reality that is incredibly grounded. So let's bring this down to the street level.
Let's do it.
How does understanding the mechanics of this ancient covenant change how you, the listener, wake up on a random Tuesday morning? The sources outline massive practical implications, and the first one is an absolute shift in gratitude.
It has to be, because it completely obliterates our sense of entitlement.
Entitlement to what?
To tomorrow, to our next breath. When you truly grasp the implications of Genesis 6 that the world could have, and morally speaking, should have ended in catastrophic judgment thousands of years ago, the mundane becomes miraculous.
The fact that gravity works today is a gift.
Yes. The fact that you have food on your table is a direct result of covenant mercy.
It changes how you experience a rainstorm or a harvest or just a change in the seasons. You weren't just observing weather patterns, you were observing the active faithfulness of God in real time.
And that humility, that gratitude, it has to translate into how we treat other people.
Which brings us back to justice. We touched on Genesis 9.6 and the image of God. But the implications for justice and human dignity cannot be overstated here.
Right. If human dignity is just a social construct like a set of rules we all agreed upon for mutual survival, then what happens when a society decides that a certain group of people is no longer convenient?
The society just rewrites the rules. They just vote the dignity. We saw it in the 20th century repeatedly.
Exactly. But if human dignity is theologically grounded in the Noahic covenant, it is untouchable by human legislation.
Because God assigned the value, not the state.
Right. You cannot harm your neighbor, you cannot oppress the weak, because they bear the image of the God who is currently holding the universe together. How you treat the vulnerable is a direct reflection of how you view the Creator whose image they bear. Justice isn't just a political talking point, it is a covenantal mandate.
That elevates everything. I mean, everything. And the document takes this elevation into our daily labor as well, which I found fascinating.
That is the sacred versus secular divide.
Yeah. There is this persistent nagging feeling in a lot of people that their daily job, whether they are formatting Excel spreadsheets, fixing plumbing, or staying home to raise toddlers, is just secular busy work.
That it doesn't matter in the grand scheme.
Right. That the only things that really matter to God are reading your Bible, praying, or being a missionary.
The Noahic covenant detonates the sacred and secular divide completely.
How?
What did God command Noah to do post-flood? Multiply, fill the earth, cultivate it.
Build society.
Exactly. Agriculture, art, engineering, family building, city planning, these are not distractions from spiritual life. They are the very arenas of God's purpose.
So when you plant a garden, or when you design a structurally sound bridge, or when you raise a child,
You are actively participating in the flourishing of a world that God swore an oath to preserve. Your ordinary labor is deeply sacred.
I absolutely love that. It gives so much weight to the everyday stuff. But here's where it gets really interesting and honestly profoundly personal for me, and I think for anyone listening who struggles with anxiety.
Okay, let's hear it.
We live in an era that feels deeply, deeply unstable. You turn on the news and it's economic collapse, political vitriol, wars, natural disasters.
It induces a low-grade, constant panic in society.
Yes, it constantly feels like we're on the edge of the abyss, like the timeline of history is just spinning completely out of control.
But look at the historical reality of the flood.
Right. Imagine the terror of the waters rising, the absolute devastation of a known world for Noah.
The ultimate instability.
And then look at the promise that followed it. The seasons are still turning. The sun still rose today. The historical timeline is not a runaway train.
No, it is meticulously held in the hands of a God who made a promise to the earth.
When the world feels chaotic, you can find a deeply steadying truth right here. God has promised to hold the stage together until his redemptive play is finished.
The ark itself transitions from a historical wooden boat into a profound metaphor for the listener.
A metaphor for refuge.
Exactly. When the floodwaters of your own life feel overwhelming, when the medical diagnosis comes back, when the relationship shatters, when the anxiety spikes, the ark represents the reality that God provides sanctuary.
He doesn't always prevent the storm from hitting.
No, he doesn't. But he provides a way through the waters.
To summarize this immense journey we've taken today, really stepping back and looking at everything, the covenant with Noah is not a children's story.
Not even close.
It is not about petting zoos on a boat. It is the gracious, agonizing, beautiful holding action of God right in the middle of human history.
It proves that judgment is real.
It is definitively real, but his mercy is infinitely more expansive. It's the reason the story didn't end in the mud.
It is the architectural blueprint of grace that allows every subsequent generation, including ours, to exist, to seek truth, and to experience redemption.
And that leaves us with a final thought for you to mull over as you go back to your day. We've spent this time talking about cosmic preservation. We've talked about God orchestrating the massive physical framework of the entire Earth, managing the axial tilt, orchestrating the rain patterns, and ensuring the harvest century after century, all to ensure the stage is perfectly set for his grand redemptive plan.
The macro-level orchestration.
Right. But if God is that meticulously dedicated to the macro-level details of the universe, how deeply and meticulously do you think he is orchestrating the micro-level details of your own life? The seemingly random events, the frustrating delays, the seasons of drought, the sudden storms. What if none of it is accidental? What if all of it is being managed by the same faithful hands that keep the earth turning, carefully designed to bring about your ultimate good?
That changes everything.
Next time the storm clouds break and you see a rainbow, don't just think about the weather. Don't even just think about ancient history. Think about the unimaginable patience of a God who decommissioned his weapon, who manually keeps the oxygen running on our damaged ship, and who holds back the final storm just to give you time to find the ark. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep asking the hard questions, keep looking past the surface, and keep seeking those profound aha moments in the world around you.